The real positive root of the equation 7x cubed plus 19x squared minus 3x minus 20, it is equals to 0 in the interval 0 and 1. Obtain the root of the equation using the second method at the what? At the fifth iteration. So we have to first write down the second method iteration formula, which says the x of what? N plus 1. It is the same thing as s of n minus f of x of n multiplied by x of n minus x of n minus 1 divided by f of what? F of xn minus f of xn minus 1. So you have to take note of the formula, and I have to define my function. I'll say f of x will be 7x cubed plus 19 what? 19x squared minus 3x minus 20. So this is a function. So therefore I'm going to choose x0 to be 0 and x1 to be 1. So for f of 0, it will now become f of what? F of 0 raised to the power of 3 plus 19 of what? 0 squared minus 3 multiplied by 0 minus 20. At the end I will get negative 20. So this negative 20 is for this function of what? Function of 0, which is f of 0. So therefore the function of what? Of 1, which is f of 1, if I insert 1, what should I going to get? So I'll have plus 19, I'll have 1 squared minus 3 multiplied by 1 minus what? Minus 20. It will now become, so I'll get 30. So therefore the function of 1, it is what? It is 30. So you have to take note of that. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to first find the first iteration. The first iteration at n, it is equals to 1. So I have to say x2, it is the same thing as x1, because the formula says x of n plus 1. So I said when n it is equals to 1, so when n it is equals to 1, this will now become 2, and n it is equals to 1. According to the formula, this place is n, so I have to replace it as what? As 1. So therefore minus f of what? F of x1, which is x0 x1 minus x of 0. In here, and from the formula, we have n minus 1. So you have to take note that n it is 1, and I have to say 1 minus 1, and it will be 0. So x of what? X of 0. So I'll say f of what? F of x1 minus what? Minus f of what? F of x0, which is for the first iteration. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I have to first substitute what will be the value of x1. x1, it is what? It is 1. So I have to say minus f of x. So the solution that we find for f of x1, it is what? It is 3. That's for the f of when we substitute the value of x for 1, we got 3. So I have to say the x1 from the question that I said. The question, it gives us the interval of 1 and 0. So therefore I said x of 0, it will be 0, and x of 1 will be equals to 1. So this x of 1 and x of 0, 1 will be 1 and 1 will be 0. So I will now say multiplied by 1 minus 0 divided by the function of f of x1 and minus f of x0. So this is the same thing as saying the 3. The solution of f when x it is equals to 1, I have to say minus for the solution of x when we insert 0 in the function of what? In the function that we define, we got negative 20. So I have to say minus 20. So therefore at the end, x2 should now be equals to, if I said 1 minus 3 multiplied by, you have to take note that this is multiplication. 1 divided by 3 plus 20. So therefore at the end I have what? I have 0.86956 So this is the value of what? This is the value of x2. So I'm going to find the function of x2 itself. So what will be the function of what? The function of x2, it is the same thing as saying the function of this answer, 0.8695 9565. So I'm going to substitute. I'll say 7 instead of putting x, so I'll put this value. So let me just say the value of x2. So this is the value of the x2. So I will say 2 to the third power plus what, plus 19. So as you can see, you are going to substitute the value of what, of this x2 in this x2, x2, and what, and this x2. So therefore, the next thing that I'm going to do, I have to calculate it. I have to say 7 multiplied by 0.89565 cube root, and also 19 point that x2. So therefore, I'll get negative 3.633 what, 5. So I have to perform my second what, my second iteration. Second iteration, when x it is equals to, okay, sorry, when n it is equals to 2. So from the formula at the subscript, which is n plus 1, because n is 2, so I have to add it with 1, so I'll get x of what, x of 3. So this should now be the x of 3 should now become, I'll have x, so this will increase, and I'll say minus f of what, x2, and therefore x2 minus what, minus x1 divided by f of x2, and also minus f of what, f of x1. So I have to substitute. So therefore I will now say the value of what, of this x3 should now be equals to, what will be the x2? Our new x2 will be 0.8. As usual, we already find the value of what, of our x2, 95665. So I have to subtract it by what, by the function of x2, which is negative 3.6, and then I have to multiply by this x2 minus x1. So the value of x2 I will multiply by 0. Again, value of x2, which is 69565 minus 1. So then I have to divide it by x2, f of x2 minus f of x1. So this will now be negative divided by negative 3.6335 minus what, minus 3. So at the end, my new x3 should now be equals to what? Let me say 0.6. So at the end, my new x3 should now be equals to 0.9409665. So I'm going to find the function of what? Function of x3 by inserting the value of the function and substituting in what? In this equation. So therefore, this is the same thing as saying 7 multiplied by what? Multiplied by the x3 raised to the power of 3, and also plus what? Plus 19 x what? x3 squared, and also minus 3 x3 minus 20. So let me see, what should I going to get? So this will now be equals to negative 0.1749. So this is a new function of what? Function of x3, and this is what? This is the actual x3. So now I'm moving to what? I'm moving to the third iteration. Let me say this is third iteration when n it is equals to 3. So this will now become x of 4 minus the function which is f of 3, and therefore multiply by x of 3 minus what? Minus x2 divided by what? Divided by the function of x of what? Of 2. So this will now be equals to, what will be our x3? If you could remember, the value of the x3 that we find, it is 0.965. Then I have to subtract it by the function of what? X of 3, which is this 0.179. So I will now say, but I have to delete this, but you have to take note of it. So which is negative 0.1749, and also I have to say multiplied by this x3 minus x2, which is 0.9406 I think 0.94065 subtract by 0.8956 what 65 divided by what? Divided by f of x3 minus f of x2. So f of x3, it is negative 0.1749, which is what we find here, and therefore minus the f of x2, which is negative 3.3335. so we have minus and minus here. So at the end, what should I going to get? So therefore the next thing that I'm going to do, this will now be equals to, I'll have 0.94465 as what? As my x4. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to find again the function of what? The function of x4. So therefore the function of what? The function of this x4, it is the same thing as the 0.94456 what? 65, whereby I will say this is the same thing as x of 4 raised to the power of what? Of 3, and also plus 19 of what? Of x of 4 squared minus 3 x of what? Of 4 minus 20. So the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to substitute this x4 as what? As this value. So at the end it will be 0.017. so therefore the next thing that I'm going to do, I have to go through to what? Through the fourth iteration at n it is equals to 4. So therefore it will increase, it will now become x of 5, it is the same thing as x of 4 minus what? Minus the function x of 4, and also which is x of 4 minus x of what? Of 3, and f of x 4 minus the function of x of what? X of 3 also. So now I'm going to substitute. So at the end this will now be equals to the x of 4, it is the same thing as what we find 944,565, and I'm going to subtract by what? By the function, which is 0.0117, and therefore I'm going to say the x4 the same thing as 0.944,565 minus the x3, if you could remember, 0.94096 divided by f of x4 and f of x3, which is the function 0.017, and therefore I have to subtract it by minus 0.17 forward 1749. So what should I going to get? .4. So therefore this is the same thing as 0.944265 what? 65. So therefore, as you can see, the real positive root at the fifth iteration is approximately 0.9443. So this is the fifth iteration that we are asked to what? To find.